What's up, Klamath Falls? This is Dave.
Hey, what's up, Klamath Falls? This is Mike. And we've got some special guests with us today. From the Klamath Basin Improvement District, we have Ryan Kliever coming back to visit with us. And then from KID, Klamath Irrigation District, the Executive Director, Gene Souza. Thank you, gentlemen, both, for coming or being on the show.
Well, thank you, sir. Thanks for the introductions and invitation.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, you guys were kind enough to invite me to your little event earlier this week, and I was happy to be a part of it, and thanks for the invite. You know, I've tried in the last few months to learn, and Gene fills me maybe with too much information sometimes. I'm not sure. I mean, you are a wealth of information. I cannot tell you guys how hard both of these guys work, and what they do is a little bit above my pay grade, if you know what I mean. So I brought them on here to have a forum because you know that water is kind of a passion of ours here on the show, and we want to take care of our farmers and see that they get what they need. And these two gentlemen here are on the front lines of that battle to make sure that happens to the best of their ability. And so I'm not sure which one of you would like to lead off as far as what things are looking like for 2025 and what hurdles you're facing. So
I'll go ahead and start off with that because that's my daily job. So I will start off with the Bureau of Reclamation recently imposed a proposed action on us, which was approved in December of this year. This new proposed action went through the ESA consultation process, and I've shared with you the numbers of what that means in the amounts and volumes of water that could be made available to the Klamath Reclamation projects.
And just real quick to interject, the ESA is the Endangered Species Act, just so you guys know what that reference.
I apologize. Military, talking in acronyms. So in the Endangered Species Act consultation that Reclamation just finished has the lowest amount of water available to our farmers that we've seen in over 125 years, well, for the entirety of the project, with what they propose for how they want to run operations. We don't have the ability to replicate Reclamation's modeling on how they determined these particular volumes of water, but we were in the room when the various people were discussing how the model was created. And I don't see the document in front of me. It might be over there somewhere. But if we look at the water year type, and we're talking 2025 for this year, the way Reclamation has done their modeling, we're looking at a year that is similar to the water year of 2017. So if you were here in the Klamath Basin in 2017, you'll recall that it was a very wet year. We had a lot of snowpack. We had a lot of rain. We had a late start, if you will, for our farmers. We didn't have to get water in the system as early because of all the moisture that we had. In that year, we took 313,000 acre-feet of water out of Upper Klamath Lake, delivered it to our farmers and ranchers, and they were able to get all their products to market. This year, if we follow Reclamation's guidelines and we follow Reclamation's proposed action, that number that we're looking at this year is about 260. So a significant drop of what we've had by about 50,000, a little over 50,000 acre-feet, less than what we had in a very similar water year type. What we need in a year like this is about 315, 320,000 acre-feet, maybe 330 if we have a dry fall, to get us to have all the acres that we have here in the Klamath Basin put into production, getting crops to market, and producing economic viability for our communities. So what we're looking at is a possibility that we need to have about 20,000 acres fallowed when we have over 200% snowpack, when we have over 150% precipitation, and the lake is the highest we've seen it in years, and we're actually talking about releasing water from Upper Klamath Lake in preparation for flood control or high water marks because of concerns of breaching dikes. So removing water out of Upper Klamath Lake before it's needed for agricultural purposes because we've got so much water around the system.
So, just a dumb question on my part, 'cause I still don't understand how all this operates. Couldn't that water be diverted, say, to Tule Lake area, to one of the sumps down there, and then utilized by the farmers later in the season?
We absolutely can do that. Right now, we're taking as much water from the Lost River system that historically went that direction and move it towards Tule Lake right now. The problem that occurred because of the 2021 and 2022 system where they dried up the sumps down in Tule Lake, those dikes that used to hold that water and keep property damage from happening have sunk about a foot and a half. So the amount of water that used to be able to be held down there is no longer those volumes. Tule Lake Irrigation District has been running a pump that we call it D-plant, which moves water out of the Tule Lake National Wildlife Refuge into the Lower Klamath National Wildlife Refuge through a tunnel. They've been running that pump since Christmas. They are only able to move about 200 cubic feet per second, or I don't want to do math in public, but quite a bit of water through the tunnel right now. But because of the subsidence, even though they've got 5 pumps down there, they can only run 2 at a time without causing damage to the pumps. So that water is coming through the Lost River system. All this moisture that we have right now that's coming from Klamath Falls area is getting into my drainage system, ultimately making it down to Tule Lake Irrigation District, where they are now moving it into the sumps in the Tule Lake and then moving that to Lower Klamath National Wildlife Refuge. To the best of our ability, we're keeping that water here in the basin, but with all this runoff we have, that means that in their limitation on pumps without creating damage to other properties because the sump dikes are not high enough, we're having to divert some of that water through what we call the Lost River Diversion Channel. And we're discussing with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Klamath Drainage District right now opportunities to keep as much of that water and going to our refuges, so the Lower Klamath National Wildlife Refuge. Klamath Drainage District is currently pumping some of its water off into the refuge right now, and we have other infrastructure that's delivering that. We're looking at increasing that rate in the immediate future, trying to make a hole, if you will, in Upper Klamath Lake so that we don't get to a flood control situation where we have to uncontrollably spill any water out of Upper Klamath Lake. That way we can maximize that storage for our farmers later this fall.
It's almost like if we had some dams or something further down the Klamath River to hold that water.
Well, there is a possibility that could work. I mean, in the past, I've been in this position now for 6 years. There were what we call borrow opportunities that we're able to do. So they would lower the reservoirs down below us, allow that water to be drawn down, and then when we have a situation like this, we could then fill that water back up and then exchange that water for farming practices later in the year. Unfortunately, that tool has been removed from our toolbox.
Understood. I know it's a touchy subject, and there's lots of different opinions on how, why, and all that. But it seems like a pretty useful tool when water is such a valuable commodity in a community like this.
Yes, sir.
If I could inject, one of the frustrating points, though, and kind of what brings us to this point, is the parameters are set by the proposed action of operations of Upper Klamath Lake. Because there's over 500,000 acre feet of storage capacity in Upper Klamath Lake, and the proposed action is what mitigates us from using certain portions of that, and that to me is the more frustrating. It would be nice for conservation methodologies and flexible operations to have the toolbox downstream, because especially in water short years, those come in very, very useful. And so but the limitations of access to water off of the PA of Upper Klamath Lake is just absolutely asinine.
Yep. And PA means proposed action.
Oh, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
But I usually don't give the federal government props or give them acknowledgement for some of the good things that they do. But one of the things that the reclamation did attempt to write into this current proposed action is the ability for what we call adaptive management, meaning that as conditions like we see today are developing, we all get together and we have discussions and find out what's the best way to manage water. Unfortunately, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the National Marine Fisheries Service wrote in their biological opinions for the endangered and threatened species that reclamation must follow to a T a modeling effort that was put in, and that's the result of the modeling effort, that piece of paper over there, that they must follow that model. So if in any other industry, when you have a model, your model helps you make decisions. It's a decision-making tool. The way U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and National Marine Fisheries Service wrote in their biological opinion, that tool is now a requirement, not something that helps the human brain go through a decision-making process.
It just seems like it's, no pun intended, it's a very fluid process every year. You don't really know what weather's going to bring, despite all the forecasts and that, until we actually go through a year. So you can have all the models you want. It seems like it shouldn't just be written in stone, that there needs to be some level of flexibility.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, people have been farming for thousands of years, right? And we've been dependent upon nature. We've been dependent on the good Lord to provide for us. But as we develop technologies and we develop things to help us control our environment a little bit better, one of the things that brought people here to the Klamath Basin was the abundance of water. We had very large amounts of wetlands and lakes. It was called in 1905 the Everglades of the West. There was so much water here. In fact, when reclamation came in 1905, 1906, they said, we're not bringing water to the desert and trying to reclaim lands. Our problem here is getting rid of all the excess water that we have so that we can actually use some of this very high nutrient farmland, some of the best and fertile farmland in the world, by getting rid of some of this water. And now we're in the exact opposite, where we've created the Everglades of the West into a desert.
Right, turned it the opposite way. I do seem to recall we had talked earlier, a week or so ago, that so April 15th is when they're going to come out with their final or their judgment of what the resources are going to be.
Yeah.
But then there's a possibility on June 15th that there may be some flexibility there.
Yeah. So the way, let's start with the requirement, right? My job is to provide water for the farmers to get water to beneficial use. And for the farmers to make a farm plan, they need to understand early in the season what they should be planning with their resources. April 15th is way too late in the season for me to telling a farmer when to or how much water they're going to have on their particular field to make their on-farm plan. So right now, if a farmer hasn't made a farm plan today, he's already behind the curve. I won't have a number from the Bureau of Reclamation until approximately April 15th of an initial amount of water that could be available or that will be available for applying back to the former lakes and marshlands. As the conditions expand between April 15th and the 1st of June, as precipitation comes in and we get forecasts for the rest of the summer, Reclamation will adjust that number and could adjust it up based upon how much water comes in that time period and what the forecast is for the rest of the summer. So we could see a bump up from the April 15th forecast on June 1st. Unless you're growing grass or something that you can dry up, you've already made your commitment, you've already put your seeds, and you've already rolled the dice for what water you're going to have for this year. So a 15th June bump up, while nice, doesn't really help the planning process.
And they're very expensive dice to roll, I will tell you.
Oh, I bet. And I've seen it myself when I work, delivering fuel to these guys, that you'll see fields that get plowed in the springtime, and then a couple months down the road, they're just dead.
Mm-hmm.
Something will sprout, and they don't have the water to keep the crop alive, and it just dies right there. And you think about, the crop itself is probably the cheapest part. It's the labor, the man hours, and the equipment, use that.
Fuel costs have gone up significantly. Every time I put fuel in my tractor, it costs $500, and I can go through that fuel in 12 hours.
Yeah.
So it gets to be a very spendy game, and when you get 3 tractors running in the field, that adds up really quick.
Yeah.
So that seed, fertilizer, and labor costs have gone up. So you're absolutely right. It's a very expensive game.
And I would say that the other expense, you got the on-farm expense for each of our farmers, but I have to, for lack of a better word, tax them an assessment every year, and that assessment goes out at the end of December for the next following year. So it's not in reverse of how much they paid for. It's what I look at what I'm going to have to pay for in 2025. That bill went to them in December of 2024. I'm estimating how much it's going to cost me to run the district, improve the various channels, and run our own pumps because we are actually based upon a flood irrigation system that was gravity fed, that was developed in 1906, where I can irrigate 122,000 acres without a drop of electricity. But because everybody wanted us to be more efficient, we have invested in efficiency pumps to recirculate our water and move this water in a more controlled manner. My first year in 2019 was a year similar to this, where we were into a very wet spring. I spent $60,000 on pumping cost in 2019. Last year, because we didn't have enough water to spread it all around, I used every pump as much as I could. My bill was nearly $300,000 last year.
That's crazy. And I know farmers that I've delivered to that they were running their pumps, and it was $5,000 a month electric bill just to run their pumps. It's crazy how expensive that gets trying to move water. So, what is their rationale then? We're very similar to 2017, but the disbursement is substantially less than it was in 2017. What's the rationale there? That
You just hit on what would be an ironic statement: government and rationale. So
Gotcha.
let's put the sideboards on that just a little bit. Go ahead, sir.
Well, and I'll add that I don't think ration and rational thought were involved in the numerous conversations that I had between October of 2023 and today. I've been involved in a number of these discussions on how this action was developed. Our team provided numerous opportunities for them to look at different ways to do this. I've asked for them to reduce some of the flows in the Klamath River, specifically in periods of drought, such as we've seen in 2021 in July and August. The way the model is developed is, regardless of what is flowing into Upper Klamath Lake and what precipitation occurs, there is a minimum number set to go over Keno Dam every day for each day of the month. And if you've looked at Klamath Basin history, prior to 1918, before the Link River Dam went in, you can find photographs and written evidence that the Link River used to go dry for periods in July and August. So if you can imagine the Link River is dry in July and August, how much water is actually going over Keno? Lower Klamath Lake is still there, but in dry periods, if it's dry, how much water is actually going over Keno? The National Marine Fisheries Service has said that regardless of how much water flows into Upper Klamath Lake and how much of that evaporates off of Upper Klamath Lake, some days it's negative in July and August, 650 CFS, cubic feet per second, have to flow over Keno each and every day at a minimum. If the lake is at a higher than normal average, if we have more precipitation, then they multiply that 650 by an integer between 0.01 and 0.9. And they multiply that, so like today, where the lake is much higher than it usually is, and the precipitation is high, I think the integer of multiplying the factor today for, I think it's 850 CFS, it might be a little bit higher than that, is 0.7. So you take that 850 times 1.7, and that's what they're releasing out of, or should be releasing over Keno today.
Wow. And this is for fish?
This is for the sole purpose of whales.
Whales?
Whales.
So the whales are migrating up the Klamath now.
Well, initially,
You can't make this up, dude.
Wow.
You can't.
I'm gonna see if I can get a whale rig and head down to the Klamath, see if I can reel one in along with a Chinook salmon.
So in 1997, the coho, the Southern Oregon, Northern California subspecies of the coho, were listed as threatened. And at that point in time, they said that they didn't have enough data on the coho to understand its biological needs, and so they used the Chinook salmon as a surrogate for its biological needs, because they had a lot of data on that, of how much water a Chinook salmon needs in the Klamath River to survive. There's been lots of disputes, and I've got a whole 300-page plus article about how that was wrong, and how the person that was paid by the Bureau of Indian Affairs through the Department of Justice for a Klamath water rights claim for a tribal nation, that data was paid for by our U.S. government for a water rights claim. It was not related to biological necessities of any fish, but they use that as a surrogate for the coho. I've brought it to their attention numerous times that there's enough data now to understand that coho are not Chinook, that they are significantly different. There's been enough studies throughout the West to say coho are a tributary fish or a low-flow fish. They're off the tributaries. So if there are coho, and when there are coho in the Klamath River, it occurs when they come up to spawn. It occurs when they leave the system to go out. And if they're finding refuge, it's usually during the wintertime to find off-channel places where the flows aren't high and where they have some overhead cover, not in the main stem Klamath River itself. So I've pointed this out numerous times. I think I've got at least 80% of them to agree that we're not talking about the threatened coho. And so what they threw in 2019 was that the southern resident killer whale, of which there's 74 members of that species left on this planet, they mainly hang up out in the Puget Sound. 33 members, individual members of those 74, travel down in the springtime across the Klamath River down as they go down towards Sacramento, hang out for a little bit of time, and then they come back up in the fall, back up to the Puget Sound in the wintertime. They eat about 2% of their diet on Klamath-based fish based upon genetics. And that could be a Trinity fish. And as we all know, the Trinity River is a tributary to the Klamath River. So I don't think they have the genetics figured out to say this is a Trinity fish versus a Klamath fish. They just say all these Klamath fish, all these Klamath Chinook are needed for the whale. So if we look at 2% of their diet, we divide that by 365 days a year, we divide that by the 33 whales that need that sustenance, and we say that on average a killer whale needs 10 Chinook salmon a day. That's about 3,000 Chinook salmon that we need to have available for the southern resident killer whale. And as I understand it, the Fall Creek fishery hatchery puts tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of Chinook salmon into the Klamath River each and every year. I don't understand how 3,000, 6,000, 9,000 fish that are being added can't offset our regulatory burden for the southern resident killer whale.
As far as the stocking number, if you guys recall the pressure bubble disease that killed the fish when they breached the dams, they released them above the dam and sent them through the bypass, and they said it was pressure bubble disease that killed them. They said there was approximately 840 or 850,000 smolt that they released there. So I kind of put the number associated with the Fall Creek hatchery contribution to the Klamath around that number. I think that would be a fair assessment.
Now there's some documentation in the FERC guidance for what they have to provide, and it's somewhere between 250 to 750,000 Chinook.
Okay.
But you know, we can take that number, right? So we have all these Chinook, but there's only a little bit of habitat in these rivers for where these fish go, right? And what we're hearing this year is the Chinook salmon came up this fall. They did their thing, and then the coho, they're a later spawning fish, the coho came up and they just rooted a bunch of those Chinook redds out because there wasn't enough habitat in the areas, and so they made their redds right on top of the Chinook redds. But there's only, I think, between 40 and 70,000 coho, the threatened species, that they're actually going to release through the hatchery. So what is actually what's going on is our coho really threatened? And if that's our focus, why are we only putting 40 to 70,000 of them in the rivers, and we're putting Chinook salmon in the hundreds of thousands into the river, competing for the same habitat? Does that make any sense?
No. Again, it's government. So, are you guys starting to get the picture yet of the battle these guys fight day in and day out, trying to get water to our farmers? It's more than just let's open this gate or close that gate. That's why I wanted, and I'm grateful you guys are here. That's why I wanted them on here to explain way better than I would ever be able to what they're up against. And so you said that they did have some that came up the river and what point did they come up and spawn? Did they make it past the dams this year?
So what I was referencing was prior to the completion of dam removal, they released a certain amount of fish from the Fall Creek hatchery into the Klamath River. And best I recall, it was somewhere between 840. There was actually kind of conflicting reports about how many they released. And so that was the mortality that they figured. It was 100% mortality off of that release that they put out there. As far as the run that occurred after the dam removal, there were reports of seeing fish in Spencer Creek and Jenny Creek, clear up to Keno, and so there were fish apparently that returned up here, but that I know of, I haven't seen a lot of data on the success of that return up here. And so, like when Gene mentioned the reds, that's what they call the nest that the fish kind of excavate where they lay their eggs. And so by how many reds that they reported, some reaches, I heard like as many as 80. I think that was Jenny Creek or Spencer Creek. And Gene's a lot better about remembering specific numbers for specific things. And it's kind of infuriating because I can't remember them like that. But anyway, so he could probably tell you more of the actual specifics about that. But they did make it, apparently, from what we've been told, up to Keno and up the tributaries of the Klamath below Keno.
Okay. So I guess my next question is, in a previous conversation, prior to the Biden administration, Trump's first administration, it sounded like you guys were kind of making some progress on sensible water management changes, and I'm not sure if that's accurate or not, but I know that the last administration was really not an ear, didn't sound like for you guys.
It wasn't.
Is there hope with the current that things might change for the better?
Yeah. So I'll start off with under Trump 45, we got the attention of Secretary Bernhardt kind of late in the game, and Secretary Bernhardt was able to come here to the Klamath Basin and see what was happening, and was just astounded at the amount of water that we had in the system, and it wasn't being released to the farmers and ranchers. He directed his legal team to take a look at what was going on, and that resulted in about January of 2021, just before the change in office occurred, a release of 4 memos that directed the Bureau of Reclamation to look at the Endangered Species Act, how it was being implemented here in the Klamath Basin, how to go about the next consultation process for the ESA piece of it, what we just went through. And it basically just told Reclamation, follow the law, look at these things, look at the things that really matter, and there are some things outside of your discretion as allowed for by the way Congress has written the Endangered Species Act. These things are outside of your discretion because they're covered under state law or they're covered under other laws, so don't look at this. And we were hopeful that we would start a ESA consultation with that guidance in place, because that gave us kind of a restart, if you will, to going into looking at how we can mitigate effects on the species, finding a way that we can restore our ecosystems, not have the Tula Lake sumps dry up, not have another a problem like we did in 2020 where we had to have a rally, and then 2021 where we're basically shut down. But the Secretary Holland, about 8 days into her term as Secretary of Interior. She was advised by her senior solicitor, which is a senior attorney for the Department of Interior, who has a long history here in the Klamath Basin, that those memos need to be overturned and ignored. So she withdrew those memos from the standing policy from the Bureau of Reclamation to look at, stopped all ESA proceedings that were going on at the time for consultation with the Klamath Project, and basically held off for 2 years until we started the process again. So between 2020 and early 2023, there was actually no real work being done on the new ESA consultation other than extending the old, what we call interim operations plan, which was failing us, which had dried up our refuges, and were drying up our farmers and resulting in me having to start foreclosure actions on some of the farms. In 2023, we started the Endangered Species Act consultation again. I informed the Bureau of Reclamation and others that were there that as Klamath Irrigation District, the holder of the 1905 original contracts, that we are participating as an applicant or the applicant. When you apply for a federal action, right, you need to have someone to apply to actually have it occur. If it weren't for someone applying to have the Reclamation Act occur here, there would be no reclamation project. So the original contracts that I hold, I applied for and made sure that I was being, everything that I provided them was as an applicant for the project. And under that, I had the opportunity to provide a biological assessment, a proposed action, and be involved in reasonable and prudent alternatives in how to manage this issue. Everything that I provided to the Bureau of Reclamation and the National Marine Fisheries Service, and to some extent the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they were more amenable, but to some extent, all of that was ignored. When Reclamation put its proposed action into place in December of 24, I was told that I did not enjoy applicant status. But anyway, that is kind of the genesis of what we had to endure under the Biden administration. To get to your point about opportunities here in the future, on November 8th, we held a board meeting shortly hours after the results of the election were known. My board of directors gave me clear guidance to engage in the transition team and the new Trump administration, and to attempt to mitigate the problems that the Biden administration had given to us. I am happy to report that on Monday, Secretary Burgum reinstated, or not necessarily reinstated, he withdrew the withdrawal of
and I quit the double stamping.
Yeah.
So we got a withdrawal of the withdrawal, and because there's been some legal actions that have occurred over the past 4 years, has initiated his team to relook at what's occurred over the past 4 years in the legal realm and determine the way forward for potentially another consultation in the near future, which is hopeful.
Good. Well, hopefully a bright spot.
It is a bright spot. And we're also, I've got the foot in the carburetor right now. I'm trying to engage with numerous secretaries across this new administration. On the 25th of January, I sent a packet that was probably about 500 pages in length to 4 of the secretaries that are on the Endangered Species Committee. You might have heard about them in an executive order that includes the Department of Interior, Department of the Army, Department of Agriculture, and Department of Commerce. Those 4 secretaries have a packet from me waiting for them to get their staffs up and running, and we're planning on making a trip to DC here in the near future, and hopefully we can get an audience with these secretaries or their deputies to discuss that packet, discuss how the ESA consultation has went down, and for us to provide our solutions on how we can ensure our ecosystem is maintained, to ensure the economic viability of the Klamath Basin remains strong, and a way that we can work with all the partners and not just focus on single species management or one very strong political entity.
Well, potentially good news.
Potentially.
Potentially.
In the meantime, is there anything that our audience, the public, can do to help out? Is there anybody they can reach out to, or is there a place for a voice to be heard for the average person in something like this?
So we're currently working with a group. They provided me a T-shirt the other day, and I'm handing these out free. It's called Fill the Basin, Drain the Swamp. We've got some other opportunities for other groups that are focusing on Make Ag Great Again. We've got some Klamath, Standing for Klamath folks. I've got another order of shirts coming in. They're going out fast, and so I don't have as many as I have right now. We're engaging with that group, and we're handing out the T-shirts to allow people visibility on what we're doing. We're asking, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt, but I do apologize. You gave me a Our Water, Our Right shirt.
I did.
I don't have much for heat out here in the studios, so
Yeah.
I'm not. But thank you for the shirt. They've got one as well,
Sure,
and it will be worn and represented. So I just wanted to acknowledge that it's appreciated.
And so we'd like folks to wear these out to where they're gathering. The folks that I got going to DC have a compilation of these shirts that we're going to be wearing around. We are asking for folks to take a photograph or a video of themselves wearing their shirt, to ask them why they particularly picked the logo that they did, and how long they've been here in their family's been here in the Klamath Basin, and a message that they'd have for the Trump administration. And so we're collecting those up, and we're passing those on to the people that we're working with to see if we can get some attention and keep like I said, the foot in the carburetor.
So if somebody wanted to do that, who would they send that to?
Well, if they stop by my office, I'll give them all the information.
And that's on KID Lane, which is off of Short Road. I don't remember the street address, but you can't miss it. If you see Planasa, they're right next door. So
If you want to put your GPS, it's 6640 KID Lane.
there you go.
I don't know. I don't know how to follow it. So
Other than that, I need to reach out to E. Warner. E. Warner is a great supporter of us. I do need to get on his radar once he gets out of session in Salem and bend his ear for a little bit. Our county commissioners are great. They are very supportive of everything that we're doing here. They've made trips numerous times to DC for us as well. And I'm excited to work with them in moving the ball forward. Congressman Bentz, we are engaged with discussions with him right now, trying to find solutions that could potentially be addressed with our current state of the House and state of the Senate that may have longer lasting results than just a Trump administration. I think the Trump administration can do a number of great things for us, but how long can that last? So we need to have something that's more enduring. We just had Congressman Lamalfa's staffer in our meeting earlier this week. She's carrying the message back to Congressman Lamalfa and team of we need a little bit of change here in the Klamath Basin. We need to have the playing field leveled a little bit. Right now we're playing uneven. I don't necessarily want to tip the field in our favor. That wouldn't be fair, but at least give us a fighting chance to keep our communities alive, help me keep farmers alive, and basically keep our economy, our ecosystem together. And I haven't talked about it at all at this podcast, and the entire thing I wanted to talk about was food security and national security, which is right up my alley, being a former military officer, and I've got a master's degree in Homeland Security, and all this stuff ties together with, if we have food security, we know that our Army runs on its belly, and the Army is probably one of our key assets. And when they are worried about the homeland and their families not having enough to eat, that's a national security problem.
And in our first interview, it kind of jogged my memory. Something Gene said, I did stress the part of don't hesitate to reach out to your congressman, Cliff Bentz, if you're here in Klamath Falls, Doug Lamalfa, if you're in Northern California and seeing this for What's Up Klamath, and Senator Wyden's office, Senator Merkley's office, and just reiterate your support for the Trump administration to make those durable changes and for them as legislators that we need durable changes here in the Klamath Basin to ensure that we have our food security and we have that with a concrete water supply, an adequate concrete water supply.
Yeah, and thanks for bringing that up, because I would be remiss if I didn't recognize our senators. Again, I've been in this position now for about 6 years, and Senator Merkley's office has been great, outstanding. Every time I pick up the phone, if they don't immediately answer, they're giving me a call back within hours. They have been very responsive to all of our needs, listen to what we had to say, and in fact have taken action to help us resolve a few problems with the federal government. And so I must say that Senator Merkley's office has been absolutely wonderful to work with his staff. Secretary Wyden, he's got a great regional staffer, Nicole. She works hard. She hears what we have to say, and we spent several hours together discussing the issues. I think they're sympathetic to where we're at. And of course, Senator Wyden introduced a bill that we just got passed this past fall, so been helpful in moving a number of things along.
Well, and that's the way it should be. It shouldn't be a thing about party lines. It's about representing the community that you're in, and it's good to hear that they're actually doing that.
Right.
So that's
Well, and we do need to take a moment too to thank Congressman Bentz for pushing through HR 7398.
Yep.
That was kind of clarification of payment obligations of the districts against the federal infrastructure and what is kind of deemed as flood control, what is the reimbursable values for Link River and Keno operations, and that gave a lot of clarity to that, which should relieve some of the financial stress against the districts for repayment to the federal government. So thank you very much, Congressman Bentz and staff, for all that work that you guys did as well.
And Congressman Bentz was the elephant to make that work. But Senator Wyden and Senator Merkley also put in a similar bill that also made that work, and that made it go through Senate a lot faster. But the reason why we had to have that done is because the Bureau of Reclamation was looking at its authorities, and when they took over responsibility for Keno and Link River dams, their assessment under the Biden administration was that their only authority to run those dams was to put that financial burden on the backs of this man and the people that I assess. So the $300,000 per dam per year was looming for us to be paying the Bureau of Reclamation. And in fact, last year I paid them, I think, over $100,000. Well, 2023 I paid them nearly $100,000. In 2024, I'll just say that the bill was much more. And with the new bill in place, that burden is currently no longer on Ryan's shoulders to levy. But with that, when we developed this project, you, me, the people that were here in the Klamath Basin in 1905, when they voted to bring in the Bureau of Reclamation, the federal government, to expand what they had already built here, the understanding was once they repaid the federal government in whole for all their investments here, that title would be returned to the farmers and ranchers. That title, or that repayment, was done in 1967, at least from Klamath Irrigation District's coffers. We paid the federal government back every dollar for dollar for all the investments the American people made in developing the system, and it should have been transferred to us in that time. There was efforts to get title in the past, and we were told that we needed congressional action to actually get title. So we went through Congress a couple times, and it didn't quite work. In 2018 or 2017, Congress passed what was called the Dingle Act, which allowed for title transfer of these works to go back to its people without a congressional act. The Dingle Act basically covered that. I applied for title in June of 2021, and I am still on step number 2 of that title transfer process, which is awaiting the Bureau of Reclamation's commissioner to give me an MOU on discussing how we're going to title transfer. So that's one of the things that we're discussing with Congressman Bentz right now. Senator Merkley's office has already been on board in the last couple of years. When things have stalled, Senator Merkley's office has picked up the phone and called the commissioner directly, asking what's going, and that energized the bureaucrats a little bit. But now I need to put some more fire into it.
I imagine the bureaucrats are pretty energized right about now these days.
Well, I just got off a phone call before we had and this is horrible. I mean, I just got off a phone call before coming over here, and my understanding is there is a number of federal employees, large numbers of federal employees, if not hundreds, thousands of federal employees that have basically no paychecks effective sometime in the immediate future. I know that if I was that case, if I had transitioned out of the military into federal service, I would be in a spot right now, and I feel for those federal families, especially the folks that are here to serve the public
Right.
and to serve the people. Those people that are working hard. That's tough. But you know what happens? You know, if you want to get stronger, you want to get tougher. It's going to take a little bit of pain.
That's true. Yeah. Yeah, I feel for them too. I not making light necessarily the plight of those people, but I do imagine there is a fire lit under some folks back in DC right about now. So hopefully some good will come of that as well.
Yep.
To kind of speak on behalf of the basin farmers, we know exactly how they feel. And
Yeah.
we've endured it year after year after year when you're told that you have no resource for, you know, growing your crops. That's your revenue generation means right there. And so when you're told that you have no water, that's essentially going, you don't get a paycheck.
Right.
And we're self-employed. We can't fire ourselves. And kind of like I think we talked in our first interview, you know, I have a high school diploma. I am not exactly what somebody would just reach out and go, hey, would you like $150,000 a year to come work for me? So it creates a pretty big challenge. So and as far as being sympathetic to that, absolutely, because I do know what it feels like.
Well, and the high school diploma, I mean, I don't think anybody should sell themselves short on that, because as a farmer,
Oh, I do.
what you should, because what you guys have to do, and this is a good example what we were just talking about, with you have no idea what you're going to get for water, but you still have to plan your crops, and to be able to balance that unknown with the knowns that you do have, and still manage to sustain a farm, bring a product to market, and make some kind of a profit so you get to eat and
Right.
provide for your family, and then do it again next year. God bless you for doing it, because it's so. This has got to be taking a toll on the next generation
Yeah.
that would farm, because they're looking at the struggles that their families going through, just trying to juggle this every year. And man, I hate to say it, if I was a kid and I'm looking at my parents fighting this battle year in and year out, do I want to continue doing that, or maybe do I want to
No,
jump off the family farm? And I'm not encouraging that by any means.
Well,
I've just
we've lost the generational family farm
yeah,
because of the adversities that have been happening here. I mean, first water curtailment happened in 1992, and especially after 2001, everybody saw the writing on the wall. And we used the terminology before. When you feel like you're a victim of an agenda, it's probably because you are. And so people saw that writing on the wall, and a lot of farmers told their kids, go to school, go get a job, don't stay here, because it's just going to be an uphill battle. And you know, like we said before, I'm a kraut. I'm German. I'm stubborn, and so I decided to do this, kind of knowing what it was going to be like. But we've had some decent years. We've had some really bad years, but you always kind of sock a little bit away to make it through the hard years. And you know, it kind of goes to the other part too. I want to say is the American farmer and the blood, sweat, and tears that they put into making sure that this country is fed, clothed, the loggers to make sure that this country is housed. You know, they're kind of the unsung heroes that a lot of society overlooks anymore. It's not glamorous. And, you know, there's some of the guys on TikTok and YouTube and all that kind of stuff have their channels, And since they're not, singing and dancing and doing all the wacky stuff the kids do nowadays to get views, they only have like 10,000, 20,000 followers, but still, it would be nice if a lot more people would kind of understand where their food comes from. Price of eggs right now, that kind of do some research and you can find out why the price of eggs are going up.
Oh yeah, were ordered to slaughter tens of thousands of birds that weren't even sick.
You've done your research. A lot more people need to look into it instead of going, oh, it's Trump's fault or oh, it's the fault, whatever. So
That's just the easy way out.
I'm going to step off my soapbox now.
But to Ryan's point, he reminds me of the part of the job that I don't like. So when I came home and I retired from the military, I thought taking this job as being at that point, just a manager of Klamath Irrigation District was simply doing management stuff, taking care of my people, making sure the infrastructure was working. When water's available, get the water out of the lake, make sure it gets to the farm, and do, something very simple. I had lost track, although I grew up here in the Klamath Basin, I wasn't really tracking how bad things had gotten. In 2019, I inherited a foreclosure list that was several pages, probably 5 pages, single-spaced long. We worked through that process in 2019, 2020 to try to whittle that stuff down and work with people so that we're not being the bad government agency. I mean, Klamath Basin Improvement District and Klamath Irrigation District, we're special government districts. We're operated under Oregon revised statutes. So we're the government, right? And I don't like seeing and taking, anything for my neighbors and my communities. But I have a responsibility to make sure that I do all the financial requirements and the financial obligations of the district and follow the policies and make sure that we are viable here to do what we're doing today, which is delivering the water, acquiring the water, and defending those water rights. So we worked through the first several pages of those foreclosures. We got all those worked off, and then 2021 hit. No water for anybody. How do you pay your bill if you don't have water coming in, right? If you can't get a crop to market. So I did not start foreclosures in 21. I did not start foreclosures in 22. I did not start foreclosures in 23. However, because we did get to a point where water was being delivered at some locations and to some extent, over the past 2 years, I have initiated 20 foreclosures on farmers. I don't like that part of my job. That's not what I'm here to do.
Right?
No, not you, but
It's in the mail.
but I mean, it's horrible that I have to be the bad guy in my community. I understand hard times, and I understand everybody can't pay their bills. I understand there are things out there, but BIL, IRA, Drought Response Agency, all these other programs didn't provide the funding for these particular individuals to be able to pass their land off to the next generation, or the next generation are coming in without the means and resources to be able to pick up where their family has either passed themselves or have gotten out of the farming business. The number of land acquisitions and land exchanges in my district alone over the past couple years is, I have almost a full-time employee that just tracks the land exchanges and how those things are going, and it's horrible.
It seems like the corporate farm is the future, good, bad, or otherwise. Right? But am I wrong? With the Sierra Cascades and Panasas, and I'm not trying to throw any of them under the bus necessarily, but it seems like when others fall,
and there is
there.
There is that, right? When this project was developed, the individual farmer was limited to 160, 180 acres individually. So if you had a family group, you might be able to get a few hundred acres together. But this was all based upon family farms. And when I go out on the ditch bank and engage with the people that pay my salary, we may have a cup of coffee, we may have a beer on the ditch bank, and we may talk about things that may be unpleasant for both of us. I might be coming over there with an enforcement rule because they did something I didn't like, or maybe my guys did something they didn't like, and I've got to go repair the damage. It's much easier to have those conversations over a beer or a cup of coffee than it is to have over a phone to someone in Phoenix.
Right. Absolutely. I've got one other quick question, and then just clarity for myself. So, Klamath Basin Improvement District and Klamath Irrigation District, you guys work hand in hand, but what are the? I'm not sure what each agency necessarily does. It's different from the other.
So I'll start.
Go
So Klamath Irrigation District was the original concept for the reclamation project in 1905. Irrigation had already been here. There was a little Klamath Ditch Company and the Klamath Ditch Company and the Adams Canal and the Van Bremer Ditch Company. All these different organizations existed prior to 1905. When reclamation came on board, they identified that they're going to expand the existing infrastructure. They bought or were donated lands from these other irrigation districts, and KBID was developed under contract between under the 1905 contract to basically be the government agency that collected the taxes, the assessments from the farmers, translated that, and were the voice of the farmers to the federal government and to pay the federal government for their investment. That lasted about 3 years before we said, you guys are really messing this stuff up. And so a period of discussions took place. In 1917, the state of Oregon passed a law that allowed irrigation districts to go directly into contract with the federal government, and that's when KID itself became a real entity. So you'll see on some of our logos, established 1917. Although we were in business in 1905, we weren't really an actual entity with a contract until 1917. And that allowed us to take gravity-fed water from Upper Klamath Lake, and like I said, it was developed for delivering water without electricity to about 122,000 acres in the Klamath Valley and beyond. The Klamath Basin Improvement District is one of several what we call Warren Act individuals. I've got about 110 individual Warren Acts. I serve other districts besides Klamath Basin Improvement District, which are Warren Acts. The Warren Act came about in 1911 as electricity and pumping capabilities became available. Congress passed an act that allowed reclamation projects to have pumps installed into their canal system and pump that water to higher elevations than what could be accomplished through just gravity fed. So Klamath Basin Improvement District, I'll pass to you.
I think you just kind of described the origins pretty well. Between the Warren Act of 1911 and the Reclamation Extension Act of 1914, you know, it was the elaboration, like Gene said, after electrical powers becoming more available throughout the reaches of the Klamath Basin and allowed the water to be pumped up. So the different Warren Act districts, like Klamath Basin Improvement District, which is kind of patchworked throughout the entire project, and then you have like Enterprise Irrigation District, Pine Grove, Po Valley, Milan, Shasta View, Sunnyside, Pine Air, Plevna. There's a few others out there that kind of elude me right now, but so that makes up the balance of what is pumped up too. But like Enterprise started in 1911 under the Warren Act, and so I mean when you talk about going back in time, that's quite a ways back as far as first in time and first in right is concerned.
Yeah, and so Klamath Irrigation District again was the first development, what they called the main district under the initial development, and so all the other ones were, not all the other ones, Klamath Drainage District is the exception, but all the other districts were kind of formed off of Klamath Irrigation District as a foothold, if you will. So all the ones that he just mentioned, to include Van Bremer Ditch Company, which is a settlement contract, another thing all together. We serve all of these other districts. The exception is Klamath Drainage District, which has its own infrastructure on Lower Klamath Lake and reclaiming the lands on Lower Klamath Lake, and the two irrigation districts in Langeau Valley and Horsefly, which were initially under reclamation contracts. And there's a whole history which I'm not as clear on, but at some point in time they had a falling out with reclamation, and they developed a lot of their own infrastructure, although they're still considered part of the Klamath Reclamation Project. They still have a number of pieces of infrastructure that Reclamation put in, like the Lost River Improvement Channel, Gerber Dam, and Clear Lake Dam, which Reclamation put in, which are part of the reserve works now, that they have to pay for for operating their systems.
Okay. Do you have anything, Dave?
No,
Quiet today.
I think
It's a
your
lot, huh?
challenge coin makes sense. I mean,
It's a lot to absorb, and
yeah.
Yeah. So last time Mike showed you the challenge coin that I gave him earlier this week. The Greek king Sisyphus, and the story behind him in Hades having to roll his rock uphill every day as punishment for irritating the gods. Kind of how I feel my day, and I think most of the water managers here in the Klamath Basin share that sentiment. And with that, though, I brought two different coins today. One says Klamath Irrigation District on one side, which is the organization I represent. On the back side, I have the Endangered Species Act 50th anniversary, which is a lot of what we talked about today, is the Endangered Species Act and how it's impacting the Klamath Basin. So this is a more traditional challenge coin than the more special one that I give out to folks in D.C.
okay. Well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Oh,
Man, I'm gonna have
nice.
to come up with some gifts
Thank
for you
you.
guys. Yeah, thank you. And again, like I said in the beginning, I wanted to be kind of a forum, there's a ton. And you touched on the ditch, the early ditch
Yeah, Van Bremer Ditch Company.
Right.
in Bremer, and I know that's a whole nother tangent we can go off on. So I'd love to have you guys back as the summer and that moves along, and maybe we can touch on that then. But on what we've covered, I mean, is there anything else that you'd like to touch on as your own forum here to get out to the public?
Well, I would say thank you for having us on. Thank you for giving us a platform to talk to not just the farmers and ranchers that come into my office or that I have to call every day, but a larger audience that can reach here in Klamath Falls and beyond. What I like to tell everybody is have hope. We are working very hard. This year is going to be tough. We're doing everything we can to take advantage of this exorbitant amount of moisture that we have in the basin right now. I can't guarantee that everybody will have every drop of water they need to get their products to market, but the irrigation district managers, myself, Tule Lake Irrigation District, Klamath Drainage District, out in Horsefly in Langeau Valley, we're doing everything we can to ensure every drop of water that we can possibly get to your fields. We are working with federal agencies, with each other, to make this as good as a year as we can possibly carve out, just like we have for the past couple years. So there is hope. Have optimism, and that's what I got to remind myself every day, is I got to wake up and have something positive to work towards.
And as far as the hopeful side of stuff, it's bad that it spawned from tragedy of the LA fires, but water management in the Western United States kind of took a spotlight by that tragedy happening. And, it's kind of scary to think that we actually have continuity off of the Klamath River from the Trinity River clear down to Southern California. And so I was watching an interview with Victor Davis Hansen, and he actually used the word Klamath in the interview, and I was like, somebody actually knows what's going on here.
Knows we exist.
Yeah, exactly. And so, as far as that goes, I'm pretty confident, especially like the recension of the Bernhardt memo and all that kind of stuff. We do have the administration is aware of us. And usually, as the saying goes, squeaky wheels get the grease. And so it's time for us to squeak. I mean, we really need to make our presence known and let the administration know how bad it's been here for the last several decades. So that goes to the part of reaching out to your congressmen, your senators, and making your videos. Just make yourself heard. Tell your story and don't be bashful about it. I mean, I'm sitting here for God's sakes, and I'm not exactly what you call a personal or a public personality. So anyways, the other one too that I do have to say thank you publicly to Gene Souza for everything that he does. I've known Gene for 6 years now, and if there's ever been anybody who has the best interest of the Klamath Basin rooted in his heart, it is that man sitting right there. And he does. I mean, he pains for what he does for us, and it's a generous contribution to your time and your service, and it's muchly appreciated. And as far as being a veteran, thank you again for your service. I will also thank Scott White at Klamath Drainage District, Brad Kirby at Tule Lake Irrigation District, because the three diverting managers, KID, TID, and KDD, they have worked in very good harmony over the last several years, especially being Warnock districts where we're not the first ones to get water. I know for a fact that all three of those want to see as much water get to all Klamath Project irrigators as possible, and they have done just beyond a remarkable job. And I can't thank them enough as a farmer, as a president of an irrigation district. I cannot thank you guys enough for what you do.
Thank you, Ryan. Those kind words. I'll just close with fill the basin, drain the swamp.
And so I guess to kind of wrap up here, I mean, thank you guys again both for being on. I don't know why it's gotten so personal with me, but it has, and it's just because I love the area that we live in, I love the basin, I love the town. Got to know so many farmers over the years when I was, taking fuel and that out to them. That it got personal because I like those people. I got to know them and their families, so it means something to me. So thanks again for coming on. I know you're thanking us for having you guys, but we were thanking you because I think we're scratching each other's back here. You know what I mean? And this guy I would never play a game of chess with. I'm just saying because 6 years you've been with KID, and the minute details that you know about every aspect that you've shared with me that is far beyond my mental comprehension. It just boggles my mind. Yeah, 6 years is a decent amount of time, but your base of knowledge in those 6 years is just absolutely crazy to me. It blows me away that all the history that you know and everything. And thank you for taking the time when I do pop in at your office to share that with me. It means a lot. I try to come back and convey it. I can have pages of notes, and it still is really difficult to remember the details. So it's great to have you on the show.
Thank you, sir.
And thank you, folks, for watching. Be that squeaky wheel.
Please.
Get the word out there. Get a hold of your congressmen, senators. Let them know. We need our farmers. That's the backbone of the Klamath Basin. And I know we have the base. I know we have the hospital, and we have the college. This is the backbone. Yeah, it's hard to have any of that when you don't have anything to eat. And the day you wake up and you discover you're hungry and there's no food to go get at the store, it's too late. So stand up, make some noise, take care of these folks. They feed back so much into the community besides the products that they bring to market. We need them, and we need them for the long term. So unless you got anything else, anybody, I guess we'll
Going once, going twice.
call that an episode. So
right.
thanks for watching, you guys, sticking it out to the end, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Thank you.